Hi everyone. Now that we have arrived to the end of this term, I would like to provide you with a short course summary to sort of, give you an idea, like a short revisit to the topics that we have covered and sort of, how everything is coming together. So here are the topics we have covered throughout the semester. At the beginning, these topics were, pre-recorded on a, weekly basis for you to review. Hopefully, as we started going through the terminologies, theories, concepts within revenue management, the simulation you were working on made more and more sense to you, right? Because in the simulation, you basically implemented revenue management, right? Through forecasting occupancy, you set up your rates, and then you distributed rate information through the distribution channels, and you did some marketing and advertising that supports your pricing decisions, and you created value to your target customers through investing in facilities and services and doing refurbishments. So everything we have covered throughout the semester in terms of content actually is aligned with what you have been doing in the simulation. So we covered a total of 10 topics. They're actually less than 10 because we have 2 topics where we delve into understanding the simulation and also a simulation review chapter. So let's get into it. So we have 10 topics and we are going to visit the key terms for each topic. So visiting key terms doesn't mean that I cover each topic in detail one by one, okay? Those are included in the course recordings, and you are welcome to visit and re-listen any one of those topics. Here I just drive some of the key terms that I think are important from each topic, and this is just my perception of what the highlight of those topics are. Okay, let's move on to our first topic, Introduction to Revenue Management and Concept of Strategic Pricing. So at the beginning of this term, I have a lot of content thrown on your way to introduce you to the world of revenue management, and also so that you can start working on the simulation, right? If you don't know what revenue management is all about, if you don't understand pricing, then you can't really do much in revenue management. So in this introduction to revenue management chapter, we looked at origins and purpose of revenue management, how it started in airline industry and then how it moved later to hotel industry, but the concept itself is applicable to all service industries, right, to some extent. And we had this discussion, where does a revenue management system work? So what are the properties an industry should have to implement revenue management, right? We had things like you should have perishable inventory, time variable demand, fixed capacity, low marginal sales cost, and high marginal production cost, etc. Another important concept we cover in this chapter are the core revenue management processes. In fact, I structured the entire chapter around these processes, where we start with business analysis, then we move on to a pricing strategy, then demand forecasting, then price and inventory optimization, setting booking controls, and then distribution of your rates to different channels, and then a performance analysis. So these are core revenue management processes, and they are all connected to each other. In revenue management, we do performance measurement through benchmarking. So in benchmarking, we do this mostly through Smith Travel Research services. We identify a comp set, and then our performance in average daily rate, occupancy, and RevPAR is determined relative to competitors' average values. So this is most basic, but at the same time most important revenue management measure. Then we talked about rate restrictions. Rate restrictions are called terms and conditions, rate fences. They have very important application in revenue management. When you look up hotel rates online, for the same night, for the same type of room, you are going to see many rates available at the same time. And you need to differentiate the value of one rate from another, right? And to do that, we use rate restrictions, terms and conditions, rate fences. And these should be used intelligently to make your revenue management strategy work. Then we looked at key revenue management measures in industries that are not hotel management. For example, in airline, we have revenue per available seat hour. For restaurants, we have revenue per available seat hour. For spas, we have revenue per available treatment, can be treatment hour also, etc. Final key term in this chapter is revenue cycle. So revenue cycle looks at our operations, revenue management, and sales and marketing collectively, right? And the idea is your revenue department prices the rooms and your sales and marketing department sells the rooms, right? Through price communication, through marketing and advertising. So for revenue cycle to work, your price should be right. Your price should match the value. Then this should be supported by sales and marketing activities. But at the end of all of this, when customer comes to the property, your operations staff has to deliver that value, right? So that the customer is satisfied. So revenue cycle is completed when guest comes to the hotel and gets this positive customer experience. So in a nutshell, these are the most important topics, key terms that we covered in Introduction to Revenue Management. Then, in the same week, we also looked at concept of strategic pricing. So here we need to understand what really makes pricing strategic, right? We need to have a long-term approach into pricing. We shouldn't give short-term decisions that are in our interest in the short run, but can hurt the company in the long run. And we covered different types of pricing relevant to revenue management. So hotel industry started with cost-based pricing, right? So you basically look at your total cost and you put a markup to identify what the price should be. But in revenue management world, this is irrelevant. And we look at value-based pricing. This is, in my mind, the most appropriate pricing strategy in revenue management context, because first you need to segment your customers and find what is considered as valuable to each customer segment, right? And then you try to price based on that. Then again, here pricing is a strategy. Pricing is a long-term sort of, decision. We shouldn't be short-sighted, basically. Then the most popular pricing strategy in revenue management context today is demand-based pricing and the use of best available rate. Then also there are two sort of upcoming pricing strategies, open pricing and attribute-based pricing. Open pricing is a term that is coined by Duetto. It's a fairly new term in comparison to bar rate and demand-based pricing. And attribute-based pricing is the latest pricing strategy that hotel companies start experimenting on. So this sort of wraps up our understanding of basics of revenue management. Then our second topic was understanding the simulation. So now that we are end of the term, I feel confident that at this point you have conquered the simulation. This happened if you attended to the workshop with your team, listen to my instructions and my explanations. I think by the end of the term, you will be very comfortable with the simulation, and you will be able to understand whatever everything going on within the simulation. So there should be a huge difference between beginning of the term, when you know it was the first time you logged into the simulation and had no idea what was going on, versus you now have done individual assessment, presentation with your group, and you have been working on the simulation throughout the term. At this point, I believe you have conquered the simulation. Another basic topic of this term was presented in two parts: economic theory underlying the concept of revenue management, part 1 and part 2. So let's take a look at what was covered in this chapter. So in the first part, we have discussed Littlewood's rule. So Littlewood's rule is the rule that sort of, kick-started revenue management in the airline industry, right? Only after the development of revenue management in the airline industry, it moved towards hotel industry, and it all started with Littlewood's rule. And if you at this point, if you do not remember what it is, I suggest you revisit this section and take a look at what it is about. And the next concept we have discussed is the idea of price discrimination. So price discrimination is basically charging different prices for the same product for different type of customers, and there are different types of different degrees of price discrimination, 3 degrees, and some of these degrees are more relevant to revenue management than the others. But at any rate, in hotel revenue management, price discrimination is very much applied, and we have to apply it properly. Then we talked about benefits of price segmentation, right? Another thing we do in hotel management, because hotel revenue management, because we are working with many different type of customers at the same time, right? We have various market segments, like in the simulation, we have premium, we have bar standard, we have package, we have negotiated, discounted, tour group, large group, small group, so contract. We have many different type of segments, and we all price them differently, right? And there are benefits of charging very high and very low prices at the same time, right? Remember, as long as you have empty rooms, you are better off selling these rooms than not selling these rooms, based on perishability principle, right? So price segmentation is definitely useful, but it has to be implemented carefully. Then another important topic of discussion in this chapter was expected marginal revenue principle. So in very short, this principle says that when we are working with fixed capacity, and when the forecasted occupancy is low, it means we have a lot of rooms to sell, and when we have a lot of rooms to sell, room prices should be low, right? Because we have so much inventory. But as you sell more and more inventory, your leftover inventory is reduced, and your inventory then starts being valuable, right? So when the demand is high, less inventory you have, more valuable that inventory is. So based on this principle, the last room left in the hotel when the demand is high is considered as the most valuable room. So this whole concept is expected marginal revenue principle. Excuse me. Next, we are moving to part 2 of economic theory underlying the concept of revenue management. And here, we focused on sort of, price communication side. So when you set up your overall pricing strategy, after you set up your strategy, you need to find like an intelligent way to communicate this pricing information to your customers. Okay, and for this part of the lecture, we use the teachings of prospect theory. And under prospect theory, we talked about 5 implications: proportional price evaluations, reference prices, perceived fairness, gain and loss framing, and proliferation of choice. So in the context of the simulation, we do price communication by just inputting dollar amounts, right, in different distribution channels for different segments. But in reality, it is your, in real world, it is your sales and marketing department that does this through price communication. Because in the simulation, we were not able to cover this part so much, right? Simulation has its restrictions. If you have listened to this chapter, I suggest, you listen to it sometime back in the term, and perhaps you are not so clearly remembering what it is about. Revisit prospect theory and its implications. This is quite important part of class content. Then we talked about online upselling. In the old times, when information technology was not so developed and relevant, we did upselling in the front desk when the customer checked in. But right now, we can upsell either at the time of the booking or between booking and check-in, 3 to 5 days before customers' arrival. And we looked at some examples, right? Some good examples of upselling and some not so good examples of upselling. So at this point, when you go through this chapter, this lecture, you should be able to understand what is good price communication and what is not so good price communication. And you should be able to also give recommendations to hotel companies how to do better price communication. And final part of this chapter was about setting price levels. So here I show you how the companies that implement demand-based pricing and best available rate pricing, how do they put together their pricing strategy and how they open and close different price levels. Our next topic was competition and competitive set analysis. This topic is important in revenue management context because this is how we perform relative to the comp set is our very basic and one of the most important performance measurement. So in this chapter, we have identified different types of competitors, right? We have direct competitors, indirect competitors. Most important competitors are our direct competitors. And we have also discussed how to choose a comp set. And we have seen pure application of this concept in the simulation, because in the simulation you have your hotel versus all the other hotels in the same workshop, and most of the time not all those hotels are your primary direct competitors, right? You look, for example, who has similar facilities and services as you, who has done similar refurbishments as you, right? Those are the ones that are most probably targeting similar types of customers. So how to choose a comp set in this chapter we discuss extensively. And also in this chapter, we talk about benchmarking. Again, here we go back to the basics of revenue management, Smith Travel Research and benchmarking data, but this time we are expanding it, right? We explain how to put together a comp set, what are the rules of putting together a comp set, etc. Again, technology has a lot of different impacts, right, to hotel revenue management, and one of those impacts is in this chapter coming to us with digital versus manual comp sets. So when we talk about a manual comp set, we talk about the comp set that is selected by hotel executive management committee, versus digital comp set. You have an OTA. I think we gave the example of Rev Plus of Expedia, and AI is basically is running the system and telling each hotel what their comp set should look like, right? So we had a discussion in the lecture about the digital versus manual comp sets and what direction hotels should take. And we completed this chapter by Cornell professor Katie Ann's short presentation about pricing relative to the comp set. this is very important, and this is what you have been actually experimenting and playing in the simulation, right? According to your value creation and target customers, how you price your hotel versus how your competitors price their hotel. Because your value is relative to the competitor's value. Your prices also should be relative to the ComSet prices. So if you are not clear with, how you should price relative to the ComSet, I think it's a good idea to revisit Professor Katie Ann's presentation, because she has a couple of very important points. For example, the most basic one I am going to state here. So she has done quite many studies using Smith Travel Research data, covering different time periods: recession, no recession, economic downturn, normal period, and different parts of the world: North America, Europe, Southeast Asia, etc. And one of the things she has identified is that by lowering the price, you can increase the demand. But increasing the demand when you lower the price is not high enough to bring your RevPAR index higher than 100. Okay, so this price discounting, lowering the price in the long run, is definitely not in the best interest of the hotel. So this is one of the very basic observations from her studies, but pay a visit to what she has done to remember how to price relative to the ComSet. Another fundamental chapter of this term is forecasting and controlling availability. So before you come to this topic, you have already been doing forecasting, right? You are forecasting the occupancy in the simulation, and the way you do that, system estimates unconstrained demand for the entire market, and then that demand is broken down into sort of fair share for each hotel. Then you have some in advance bookings that are already recorded in the system, some cancellations and no-shows. Then you estimate the pickup and you develop your short-term forecast. So even prior to this chapter, you are already doing some kind of forecasting. But in this chapter, we are looking at forecasting concept in much more detail. Again, this is a fundamental chapter as well. So if you just went through the simulation, that is all you know about forecasting, I suggest you go back and review the teachings of this chapter. So at the beginning, we talked about traditional revenue management forecasting, and we looked at 4 components of effective demand forecasts. So here we talk about the variables that we take into consideration when we do a forecast. And I call this traditional revenue management forecasting because today we started using AI and machine learning technologies, right? So we are not at the basic level anymore, but to understand the essence of revenue management forecasting, you need to understand what variables we need to consider, we need to think about. And also in this traditional revenue management forecasting graph, you need to understand how we look at time in forecasting. So we always assume that we are on today, and from now, we look at 2 different points in time. From today, we look at past. This is historical data, what happened historically, versus from today, we look into the future. How many reservations on hand we have today, right? We call that ROH or OTB on the books. How many reservations we have in our hand today for a future date, and we sort of put those together to generate a short-term forecast. There are also some important terms to understand in revenue management context. Those include unconstrained demand forecast, denials and regrets, and also booking pace. But booking pace is something also we casually have been talking about. Please remember the meaning of unconstrained demand forecast, denials, and regrets. Okay, these are important concepts. So unconstrained demand forecast is basically the true demand to the hotel in the absence of all restrictions. And what are hotels' restrictions? You are restricted by number of rooms you have, terms and conditions you have, the prices you have, room types that you have. So if you think none of those restrictions exist, what would be the true demand to the hotel? That is unconstrained demand forecast. Then we have denials and regrets. So this is when a customer doesn't complete the booking. Why is that? Right? Are you denying the customer, or is it a regret? So these are important terms to understand. Then we tap into the concept of forecast error. Forecast error in the name of variance is also something you are already looking at in simulation context, right? Forecast is what you thought was going to happen, and actual means what actually happened. And when you look at the difference between actual and forecast, you get forecast error. So there are different ways of measuring forecast error. Again, if you do not recall what this is, please revisit the chapter. And also we had a short discussion on forecasting accuracy as a revenue management performance measurement, and here I have I think a 5-6 minute talk by one of the Duetto founders, Marco Benvenuti, very intelligent guy, that explains us why forecasting accuracy shouldn't necessarily be a revenue management performance measure. And also I introduced you basic forecasting methods. So this is not a math class and this is not a math degree, but you still need to understand very basically what a revenue management forecasting might look like. So with this chapter, forecasting and controlling availability, we officially complete all the basics of revenue management. Then our next topic is RevSim review. So in RevSim review, now that you got into revenue management simulation more seriously, and then we are going into more detail in terms of our content. So this was the time you really start grasping what revenue management simulation is all about. So in this topic we just reviewed what is going on with the simulation so far. Moving on to topic 7, strategic pricing and management of distribution channels. So this is not a basic revenue management topic anymore, but the idea is very simple, right? After you do your forecast, price and inventory optimization, set booking control, then you need to distribute your pricing information to different channels, and this is what this topic is about. And in this chapter we looked at direct versus indirect distribution channels. So as a result of taking this class, you have to know what channels are considered a hotel's direct channels and what channels are considered a hotel's indirect channels, what are the pros and cons of using each of these channels. Then we looked at hotels' relationship with online travel agencies. There's a very delicate sort of relationship between hotels and online travel agencies, right? OTAs need inventory from hotels, and hotels need OTAs to increase their visibility to the customers. But at the end of the day, hotels should do everything in their power to increase direct bookings, right? This is not to say they shouldn't use OTAs. They should use OTAs because OTAs help them to reach customers in different source markets that they cannot necessarily reach themselves. So use OTAs for visibility, but after, how can you convince them to book directly with you? This is very important question. The final topic, key term, is rate parity. So rate parity is something you have been looking at since the beginning of the simulation, right? On our first day, on the first page, when you put your pricing information after you do your pickup forecast, you have the choice of clicking rate parity. If you click rate parity, you just input gross room rates, so you are not going to have different rates per different distribution channel. But if you unclick it, you can actually input different rates per different distribution channels, right? So Here we visit rate parity concept in detail and discuss sort of, pros and cons from hotel's perspective, why to follow or not to follow rate parity. Topic 8 is evaluation of revenue management effectiveness. So at the end of the day, when we implement our revenue management strategy, has this strategy been successful or not? So this is what we look at in evaluation of revenue management effectiveness. And this is a very sort of, simple and a straightforward chapter. We visit benchmarking once again. I think this is like the third time we visit the concept of benchmarking. And then we also introduce additional revenue management key performance measures. You actually don't need to wait for this chapter, right, to see what are the revenue management KPIs. When you look at the reports from the simulation, you see many of these KPIs there, right? Even when we did the first class on how to interpret RevSim results in our workshop, we looked at measures, right, like, gross operating profit per available room, total revenue per available room, total revenue per available square meter, etc. So there are many KPIs. But what should be a revenue management KPI? That depends on revenue management objective of the hotel, right? Is hotel just doing rooms revenue management, or are they trying to do total revenue management, or are they trying to do total profit management? What is it that they are trying to implement, right? When they do revenue management, you are going to select the KPIs according to your revenue management objective and revenue management implementation strategy. Topic 9. Up to this point, we have only discussed revenue management applications in the hotel industry. So starting from this chapter, we are going to look at some other industries, right? And what have we looked at? Here I show you two examples of two other industries within hospitality management, restaurant revenue management, and spa revenue management. And also we have revisited revenue management ingredients once again, right? And we said basically we look at revenue management ingredients versus an industry's characteristics to understand to what extent you can implement revenue management to that industry. Also, when we look at a revenue management measure, we need to think about revenue management objective. And remember, revenue management objective is usually broken down into two components. One is about rate, average rate, versus capacity utilization, right? In the context of a hotel, average rate is average daily rate, and capacity utilization is occupancy. And when you multiply occupancy with ADR, you get RevPAR, which is the most basic revenue management measure. And then our topic 10 is contemporary application of revenue management in tourism and hospitality related organizations. So here, we looked at evolution of revenue management, comparing it to what it was before and what it has become today. And also we looked at some revenue management systems. So revenue management is mostly implemented through use of a revenue management system. And we looked at the most popular revenue management systems that are out there. And we concluded this discussion by saying, there should be a balance between revenue optimization and customer satisfaction, right? So we shouldn't do anything that upsets the customer at the end of the day, because that is not going to be in the best interest of the company in the long run. So with that, we conclude this term. That's a wrap, right? And I have been keep on telling my students, there is only one thing money cannot buy in this world, and that's time. To me, time is the most valuable thing. That is what we are spending every single day, every single moment. So I would like to thank you for investing your time in this class. This topic is a passion of mine. I enjoy teaching it. I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy researching it. I enjoy providing consulting services on it. So it has been my pleasure teaching you. So I hope you have learned a lot and you can use some of this knowledge in your future careers. Take care and bye-bye. Hi everyone. We are going to do a short course summary and revision. Let's jump in. Here is the exam information. This exam is going to be open book and it will be online. The reason that it is open book is primarily due to the involvement of the simulation. I want you to be able to log into the simulation system and look at your reports, your decisions, to give informed answers to the questions in the test. Weight of this assessment is 35% and it will be marked out of 35. Your exam reading time will be 10 minutes and the entire duration of the exam is 120 minutes. In the previous presentation, I went through each topic that we have covered and I have given you sort of, some keywords and I have explained you those keywords. And if you look at the content, you see this is the list of topics we have covered so far in this term. In the final exam, your experience with the simulation holds a significant importance. So it was quite important to immerse yourself in the simulation, be present in the workshops and work with your teams to give decisions and also to see the consequences of your decisions, right? Those are the two big components here. One is to be able to enter your decisions with a strategy in mind, with a plan in mind, and after that month finishes, are you able to understand what happened? To what extent you have done well, what aspects of your performance is well done and what aspects you need more improvement and what aspects really are not working, right? If you are able to grasp an understanding of those, then the exam should be easy for you. So there will be questions tying your learning in this subject to your RevSim experience, right? And you have partly seen that in A1 already when you were assessing your trial simulation performance. I was able to check to what extent can you tie your learning in the subject to the RevSim experience. And like I have mentioned, your active participation to the simulation will ensure you are able to answer exam questions. So what type of questions can you expect to see in the exam? There will be multiple choice questions, short answer questions, and scenario-based questions. So let's take a look at examples. So here's a multiple choice example. This one has 2 points. Different industries engaged in revenue management strategies. Select all industries that are less suitable to engage in revenue management tactics when pricing its product. So here you know that service industries are pretty much applicable to implement revenue management, right? You need to have a perishable product. Cruise industry is like a floating hotel, has a perishable product. Well, hospitality industry is a part of service industry. Restaurant industry is a service industry. Golf is a service industry as well. Wine industry is the one that is less suitable to implement revenue management, for example. This is an example of a multiple choice question. It is very straightforward. So now let's take a look at short answer questions, and I have an example here. According to your perspective, what are the top 5 crucial strategies for achieving success in RevSim? Additionally, how do you personally define this notion of success in the context of RevSim and revenue management? So here's a question. You cannot really answer this question by not playing the game, right? You have to be involved in the game. You have to be immersed playing this game throughout the term to be able to answer this question easily. And if you feed this question to a generative AI, you are not going to get a very intelligent answer either, right? But for anybody that have played the simulation throughout the term, this should be a very easy question to answer. Also, let's take a look at this scenario-based question. So the question itself is, how do you interpret the following graph in RevSim? So this one is a graph that you were looking at quite many times, right, as we play along the game. So it's a trend tab where we compare our occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR index throughout the game, right? So for this example, this team played this game from January to December, so entire 12 months. So here, again, this is a very easy question. We observe RevPAR index that is in blue start lower than 100, but then for the majority of the time, this hotel has done well, right? But starting from October, the last quarter, October through December, RevPAR decreased significantly. And if we look at the overall pricing strategy, most of the time it is discount pricing, right? Look at ADR index. It is well below the baseline in quarter one. It increased above the baseline in quarter two. So in quarter two, this hotel didn't implement discount pricing. They implement premium pricing. And in quarter three, they implement discount pricing, but it paid off. RevPAR is still above 100. But in quarter four, they continued implementing discount pricing, but look at occupancy index, they couldn't fill up their hotel. And therefore, you see ADR index almost stays stable. RevPAR index follows the pattern of occupancy index. So their strategy, their pricing strategy of discount pricing did not pay off in quarter four, and this hotel should investigate why. So this is how you sort of interpret this scenario-based question in relation to the simulation. So that's all really about the type of questions. It is an open book exam. You have access to all the class content plus the simulation. Don't worry about it at all. If you have attended the classes, you covered the lecture material, and you got involved in the simulation with your team members, you should be fine. Best of luck, everyone.